Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This seminar is brought to you by the nonprofit organization I Explore. We have over 80 teachers and 500 students from multiple countries. Through our seminars and classes like this one, I Explore helps students learn and grow. Today, I am honored to introduce our presenter today, Roy, who will be teaching us about economics as well as the history of money. So take it away, Roy.
Hi guys, I'm Roy. I'm a grade 9 student right now in Canada, and I'm an international student. I'm 15 years old this year, and today I am going to take you guys to explore the world of economics. And let's jump right in. So the first question I'm going to ask before we start is that who doesn't need money? Well, no one. Except maybe some hermits in the mountains who never get in contact with other people. But that are some extremely rare cases. And for most of us, we need money and we need it to survive in the societies. And money is becoming one of the most important factors in the economic systems. So that first of all, I'm going to introduce you some brief histories and backgrounds of money. So I'm pretty sure not all of you knows the origin and history of money as a currency. So what I mean is a long time ago in prehistoric times, money wasn't even invented. And well, people don't use money. They have no idea what currency is, and they just barter. Barter is actually very simple to understand. It's just using a thing to swap for another thing. For instance, in these pictures, you can see human and ants swapping foods. And this was very common at the time because people lived rather primitively, and they have not developed themselves into a very advanced civilization. But then as time moves on, the idea of currency slowly began to emerge in some forms. And the most common form of currency is shells. Hi, Dorothy. I think you have a question, right? You can type it in the chat, and then at the end, I'll answer all of the questions at once. Okay? So, yeah, I was talking about shells. Shells was the most common currency when people slowly began to use them, because unlike fish or salt, it was easier to preserve, and it is lighter and easier to carry around and trade with. You can keep the shells in your home without worrying them to get rotten after a few days. But anyways, the picture on the left shows native shell money, and the picture on the right actually shows people who live in the Arctic region using fishes to trade. And I think the major reason for them to use fish is because resources in those areas are very scarce, and the only valuable thing that is suitable for trade for them could be fish. So the conversation in the comic happened for that culture. But then after a few more hundreds, perhaps 1,000 years later, people began to use coins as currencies, since they're easier to control and they're easy to identify and they're easier to keep or reserve. So when you find heavy metal or rare metals to forge them into coins, it kind of restricts the people who have the power and ability to do so. And by this, I mean, there were a lot of countries and states at the time coin was invented. And I believe that was around medieval times, or maybe some hundreds of years even earlier than that. And countries are fighting for power. Kings and queens and nobles need to use this as a way to take control of their own area. And when their people use these coins with their literally with their profile on the coins to trade. It kind of creates a sense of nationality and authority for these leaders, and they love to use this way to maintain their power. And the technology and resources, as I mentioned, to make coins is rather hard to get when comparing to other currencies like shells, fish, or salt, because those are all from the nature. But these coins are made by man, as you can see on the picture on the right. So there are a lot of medieval people who are forging coins, and it's kind of a complicated method. Coins are also easy to identify because they kind of all look the same, but just in various types. And they're much more easier to reserve than shells or other currencies before, because metals don't normally get destroyed by nature forces. And so they can be kept basically along your lifetime. And then you can use it whenever you want. But then there's one more problem, because the coins sometimes can get really heavy if you're really rich. And the dude on the right is carrying all his fortune on his back. And I believe that happened around the time. So when people became too tired of carrying all their money around and being so painful, they decided to use something lighter, paper. So the paper currency was then invented. And by the time now, civilizations are a lot more advanced, and they have letters and languages written on the paper currencies to show the detail of the money. For instance, who it belonged to, and the effective dates, or maybe the people who manufactured it, or the numbers that represented the currency's identity. So people began to use paper currency. Until now, we are still using it. And if there's, oh yeah, I see a question. Exchanging other things? Sorry, I don't really understand your question, Michael. So what do you mean by exchanging other things? Oh, were you talking about barter? Because yeah, people just use one item to exchange for another item instead of using money as a currency, as a media in the middle. So just feel free to ask questions. And now you might question, why am I telling you all this history of money? Aren't we supposed to talk about economics today? Well, I think when you're getting to know about the history of money, you can see how human has worked hard to improve their conditions of trade by improving their currency. And trade was one of the most important aspects of human civilization in the past, because it enables people to communicate throughout the entire world. And because people travel to trade, they also exchange knowledge, information, technologies, and so much else. So improving trade routes, trade technologies, and trade methods were essential to the evolution of human civilizations. And that brings us to the purpose of economics. So here is a question for all of you. And that question is, what is the purpose of economics? And I have a few options for you to choose from. And I'm going to start a poll. So y'all have 1 minute to respond. So the most answers are option C and D. So C is empowering countries or empires through the study of trading and money, which sounds correct. And D is getting the things you want through trade. Yeah, both of them really emphasizes trade, but you know, economics is more than just trade. Trade is one part of it, and yeah, it is a very major part of the study. but then there's a lot more than trade in economics. And the actually correct or the most precise answer is B, allocating limited resources among unlimited desires. So congratulations to the 6 of you who got it right. And I mean, option B can basically summarize all the other things in it, because when you think of it, human desires and wants are unlimited, and that means we want a lot of things, which is reasonable, but it is not practical to actually fulfill all those desires, because resources on the earth is limited, and that means we have only one planet. We have only certain amount of water in our sea and oceans. We have only certain amount of oxygen in the air. We have only a certain amount of jewelry in the ground. So the economics study is to find a way to allocate the best way to distribute these limited resources to human beings who have unlimited desires. And empowering countries or empires is also one way of distributing these resources to the unlimited wants of the empires. And for the other options, of course, distributing resources can make you money, and it can also get the things to trade because you're doing so, and showing off in front of friends and family. Yeah, I guess so, because I don't know why one of you actually chose that, but I guess it's true. So this is the purpose of economics. And as you can see, this little dude here, he's learning hard because he's trying to understand what the hell is going around him in the world. Because there's many things we can't really explain without learning economics around the world. And these are some phenomena that are really heavily related to economics. And some of them are written on his book cover, like market prices, demand, supply, budget, taxes, costs, labor, wages. And some of them I will mention later in the seminar. But now, what exactly is economics? Well, I just told you the purpose of it, but I didn't tell you what it is. So it is actually a social science studying how you make, transfer, and buy or sell stuff or services. So there's always a production and in an economic system. So people who make things and produce them. For instance, workers in the factories who make cars and produce cars, or farmers in farms who make and produce milk. And there are also people who are transferring or sharing these items or services. So the transportation systems in our countries, and also there's the customer and seller end who buy and sell these stuffs or services. So at the same time, economics is actually divided into two branches. One is called microeconomics, and the other one is called macroeconomics. They might sound really similar, but they're actually very different, because as you can see from the name, microeconomics is focusing on individuals and businesses, while microeconomics is focusing on the bigger picture, countrywide or worldwide. And this means that microeconomics is basically closer to your daily life, but then macroeconomics is more politics related. As you can see on the comic on the left, there's the British Prime Minister riding on a charger and waving her national flag to say charge to the other European Union members. And I believe that is a very famous event in European history, because basically the UK wants to exit from the European Union due to many reasons. And one of them, I believe, is the economical reason. And it was called Brexit. So it's related to macroeconomics. And the picture on the right shows a negative business cycle, and it is related to microeconomics, so personal businesses. And you can see the cycle is about when families spend less, businesses face cutbacks, which means they earn less money. And when they earn less money, they will likely to get rid of some of their employees, and which means there will be loss of a job for those employees. And when these employees get unemployed, they could fear, they could not find a new job because of fear of losing a job again. And then their families spend less because now that they're unemployed and their families are losing a source of income. And this becomes a negative cycle, which is really bad, and it's related to microeconomics. So feel free to ask questions. And speaking of economics, we cannot avoid this person who is being called the father of modern economics. He is Adam Smith, and he was a Scottish economics philosopher and author in the 1700s. So the reason why this man was so important in the economic world is because most of the fundamental basic ideas we have today in economics was being invented or developed by him. And one of his most famous works is called The Wealth of Nations. And it is a book about economics. So it's the picture on the far right. And that's Adam Smith. And so one of his most significant theory is about free markets and the invisible hand. And you can see the invisible hand on the left and the middle. So this hand basically controls and regulates the free markets to make sure that the markets don't go out of control and become a chaos. And basically, how this works is that Adam Smith believed that through self-interest, every individuals in the market, in the free market, can contribute to the growth or total benefit of the entire market by implementing their self-interest into actions. So that basically means that you don't have to be selfless. You don't have to really do something because you want to help other people. Instead, you do things that benefit yourselves. And through that way, when everyone take actions because of self-interest, then the free market can actually function perfectly, and everyone can make profit together. Because as Adam Smith said in the book, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves, not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our necessities, but of their advantages. So which means you get what you want from telling people what they want. And when people are persuaded by you that what they're doing is what benefits them, they will likely to be willing to do it and at the same time benefiting yourself too. So for this instance, the butcher, the brewer, and the baker makes meat, beer, and bread, not because they're so kind to just give it to you, but they want the money from you. And when you give them money, you receive the food you want. And therefore, it's a win-win situation where no other third-party interference occur. Unlike government-controlled markets, when the government takes a lot of limits for this to not happen. So that is why Adam Smith is so supportive of the free markets and the invisible hand. And so now I'm going to take you to look at some fundamental economic concepts we have here. So I'll be talking about roughly 5 to 7 of them. And these are really important and basic ideas that you need to know if you want to take a deep look into economics, because they are just the Newton laws in economics. I mean, when you want to study physics, you have to know that everything will fall to the ground without interruption, which is called the gravity law. And that works the same for economics. You need to know what scarcity and utility is. You need to know what marginal thinking is. You need to know what supply and demand. You need to know what's opportunity cost. And you also need to know what is GDP. And for some of these, I'm pretty sure that some of you have heard of it before, and you might actually know it. But I don't think many of you know all of it. So let's jump into it. So the first one is scarcity and utility. So scarcity is actually what I've talked about in the purpose of economics. So you can see on the left of the balance, there's limited resources and time, which includes land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So these elements basically means the organisms and lives we have on Earth, which means land. Labor means human beings who can work, and capital means machines or properties we own. And entrepreneurship means leaders who can lead a company or many people in their corporation. And these are limited resources because not everyone can work, right? Some people can work, like children or sick people, or maybe retired people. And not everyone can lead. That is even more obvious because not everyone can be a CEO. And land resources are also limited because we have only one Earth. That's obvious. And capital is also limited because humans' production capability is at a certain limit. So, which means when you call all of the human beings on Earth to produce something, they cannot produce something infinitely large or significant because they have only a certain amount of energy left. And on the other side of the balance, which is really heavier than the left side, is the virtually unlimited human wants. So these are all the things that we want on a daily basis, like food, clothing, shelter, security, comfort, medicine, jewelry, blah, blah, blah. And to be honest, the limited resources cannot fulfill all of them. And this is called scarcity, which means you can't always get what you want. And what you want is very limited. So you need to find a way to actually obtain it through some measures. And that is why we study economics. At the same time, utility. So as you can see on the chart, when the rat is eating cookies, at first he's very happy because the cookies are delicious. And when he has eaten 3 or 4 cookies, he's still wanting for more. And the red line represents his happiness after a certain number of cookies eaten. So the higher the red line is, the level of his happiness will become higher. And as the line goes right, which means he has eaten more cookies. So you can see the line is actually a curve, and the curve is going increasing slower and slower, which is kind of interesting because if you like something, shouldn't you just keep liking it after one? Well, actually, no, because when you consume the same type of item over time and repeatedly, the happiness you receive decreases one by one. And this is called diminishing or decreasing marginal utility. Utility itself means happiness. So how happy you are after you've consumed this item. And marginal means unit after unit. So from cookie number 3 to cookie number 4, you have increased a certain amount of utility. And diminishing means that this increase is becoming smaller and smaller. So the first time you might have increased this amount of marginal utility, but then during the 10th time, you might only increase this much. And by the 28th or 29th, you can see he's very, very full. You basically increase little or none utility. And this concept tells us a lesson is that you should be reasonable and never buy too much of a thing, even if you think that it is very good and has no harm, because too much is never too good. So you need to stop at a certain level where your marginal utility doesn't increase much anymore. And this helps us to become a more calm and reasonable customer. Because when we are buying things, if we don't think in this aspect, we might actually buy more than we need. For instance, food, or maybe I don't know, toys or things in a game, or maybe clothes. So all of these consuming situations can be applied with the decreasing marginal utility. It is universal, and this is a very important concept to know and to gain knowledge of. Now moving on to marginal thinking. So for instance, you can see this as, well, selling shoes. So if you're a shoe seller and you're selling shoes, so on the first day, you sold 5 shoes, so you drew 5 boxes on the graph. And on the second day, you have sold 3 shoes, which is less. And then on the third day, you only sold 2 shoes. But now you need to know is that no matter how many shoes you have sold each day, the place you're selling it, which is a store, needs the amount of rent which is equivalent to 1 shoe's price. Which means, like, if you're selling a pair of shoes for $50, the rent is $50. And on the first day, you sold 5 shoes, which means you made $250, and you paid $50 as your rent. So in total, you have made a profit of $200. And on the second day, you made a profit of $100, and on the third day, only $50. So on the third day's night, you're thinking about whether you should sell shoes again tomorrow, because you can foresee that less and less people are going to buy your shoes, because now that they're knowing that your shoes have a slight problems on laces, and when they're telling other people, less people are going to come to buy, because they know that your shoes are having problems. So you predict that the next day you can only sell 1 pair of shoes, which means when you have paid, you actually earned nothing. So at this point, a reasonable seller would just stop selling shoes and then turn to sell other things, because when your marginal benefit equals to marginal cost, you should stop selling. And by this, I mean marginal benefit is the profit you gain for each unit of items sold. So in this case, each pair of shoes, how much money you get for each pair of shoes sold? $50. And the marginal cost is the amount of money you pay to sell each item. So in this case, we don't actually have a marginal cost, or we can distribute it into all the shoes that we have sold, because no matter how many pair of shoes we sold, the cost is only going to be $50. So on the first day, the marginal cost is 50 divided by 5, which is 10. So for every pair of shoes sold, you have a marginal cost of $10. And on the second day, because you only sold 3 pairs of shoes, when 50 is being divided by 3, you approximately have more marginal cost, which is like $17 or $18. And on this day, when you only sold 2 pairs of shoes, when you distribute it to each pair of shoe, for each pair of shoe you sold, you have to pay $25 as rent as marginal cost. And on the third day, when you only sell one pair of shoe, the marginal cost becomes $50, which is equal as the marginal benefit. And you should stop at this point because you can't make profit anymore. And when you know that on the fifth day, you're not even going to sell a single pair of shoe, you should just stop in the future to sell any shoes in that place. Because now that your marginal cost is going higher than your marginal benefit. Am I clear enough? Someone asked me, why does the shoe pairs sold are decreasing? Well, because this is only a graph, I can only guess the situation. For me, I would say that, as I have mentioned, your shoe has a problem, which is about your laces. For instance, maybe your laces can't tie really well. And at the first day, people don't know this problem. They are very happy to buy your shoes, which has good prices, like only $50. But then on the second day, some of the more cautious people began to find out about these problems, and they are telling people around them to not buy shoes in your store. So less people came, and that began to grow in a cycle. So less and less people come to your shoe shop because of your problem on your shoe. And that's the reason why the shoe pairs sold decrease. So this is marginal thinking, which is basically about thinking about the future unit by unit instead of thinking it all at once. And having this set of mindset can help us to make many reasonable and affordable decisions, because it doesn't only apply to businesses and commerce. It also applies to our daily life. And you can use it in decision making. Well, you can use it in other aspects. They all help you, because when you divide things up into units, and when you see that the marginal benefits are not going to be higher than marginal cost, you know when it's time to stop, and it can help you a lot. Trust me. So this is marginal thinking. And moving on to supply and demand. Okay, so as you can see, in this situation, I guess we're selling pizzas in a pizza store, and there are people who are buying it. So the chart shows that for when 8 pizzas are sold, the price is at $3. Now, let me first explain what supply and demand are. Supply is the blue line that you can see, and it is increasing when the amount of pizza sold increase. And the price is also increasing when supply increases. Well, on the other hand, demand is a downward slope, which means when the quantity of pizza sold increase, the price of the pizzas sold decrease. I know it's kind of complicated, but so basically supply is people who are providing the pizza, people who are selling it, and people who are manufacturing it. So this is the supply end. So as a seller, you want to sell your pizzas at a high and reasonable price so that you can make profit, right? But there are also buyers, and your customers don't really want to buy your pizzas at a really high price, because then they can just go to other pizza stores and buy cheaper pizzas. So you need to make sure that you make a reasonable price which your customers can afford and can accept to buy your pizzas. So in this occasion, the supply and demand curves are being used to determine the most suitable price and quantity for the both sides of this trade, the supply side and demand side. So as you can see, these two lines intersect on the graph, and the intersection point is being called as the equilibrium. And you can see from the name that The equilibrium means when the utility, which I have mentioned before, the happiness on both sides are maximized, which means the sellers gained as much profit as he can gain, and the buyer saved as much money as he can save to buy these pizzas. And at this equilibrium, in this case, is a price of $3. And at this price, the supply side of this trade can provide 8 pizzas. Now, the reason he wouldn't provide more or less pizzas is because when he provides more pizza, the price is beginning to fall. So let me take a pen. So if he sells the price at here, let's say it's $4. So when he raises the price to $4 and he can provide more pizzas, right? For instance, 10 pizzas. But at this time, he won't make the most profit. Why? Because as you see this line, this red line, demand, the point vertical to this point, which is the price and amount the supply provides, is actually lower and not intersecting together, which means the demand will only ask for a price of $2 if there's 10 pizza slices sold. This is because when in the market more items appears than you need, you begin to value it less. Because there's a saying back in the ancient times that scarce things are the most valuable ones, which means in the opposite occasion, if the amount of pizza slices provided becomes 6, which is here. If there's only 6 pizzas provided, then the prices demanded by the customers are going to become higher, which is $4. But at this occasion, the supply side can only sell 6 pizza slices because of the rarity of his pizza. And he can make $4 for each of the pizza, but that is still not the best option. Only in the equilibrium in which the supply and demand curve meets will both sides be the most happy occasion, because one side makes the most profit and the other side saves the most money. I should probably change the numbers a bit, because I just realized that 4 times 6 equals to 3 times 8, which shouldn't be true, because this number should be, well, let me see. This number should be 5. And this number here should be, yeah, this is 5. So yeah, this is basically a brief introduction to supply and demand. This is one of the hardest basic concepts, and I know this can be confusing, so feel free to ask questions. So key takeaways for this concept is remember that equilibrium is always the best situation for supply and demand in this graph. And you want to reach equilibrium no matter what. And in equilibrium, there's the price and the quantity on each side of the graph. Moving on to the next concept, opportunity cost. So this is another concept which takes some time of understanding. It is basically about having choices, different choices in front of you, and you can only choose one. So the opportunity cost is the cost of something you didn't choose when you're making a decision. So for instance, in this case, you look at this kid who's choosing between studying 1 hour or watch 2 TV episodes. So he has 2 choices, and the opportunity cost for him would be either not watching 2 TV episodes or not studying for 1 hour. So if he chooses either one of them, the other one is going to be the opportunity cost, which means the things that he didn't do or didn't get. In other cases, it could be potential wages or salaries or even awards. For instance, if you're choosing, which can be really hard, choosing between whether you should go to the hospital to see your sick family members, or you should go to an award ceremony to receive an award which you have been worked so hard to get. And in this situation, your opportunity cost, if you're choosing to go to the award, is maybe not able to see your family member alive again in the hospital. And the opportunity cost of going to the hospital should be not getting the award which you have worked so hard on, which can cause you a great regret. So this is a very hard choice to make. And I personally don't want to make such choices. But in life, you're always being forced to make really hard decisions. And the opportunity cost theory is here to help you with that. The way it works is to weigh these two opportunity costs. So when you're weighing the two or maybe even more opportunity cost, you consider it throughout, consider it carefully, and you think about which one is the most affordable or acceptable for you. So for the kid case, I think he should study for 1 hour, because missing 2 TV episodes can only make him a little sad and cause him to regret that he hasn't catch it up. But missing 1 hour of studying could potentially ruin his test on the next few days or something. I don't know. I just feel like the opportunity cost of studying is more expensive than the opportunity cost of missing TV episodes. So I would choose studying and having the cheaper opportunity cost. And this is a reasonable way we use to minimize our loss when making hard decisions. So you can pretty much see by now that economics can also help you to become a more reasonable and calm person, because now you have different methods to make reasonable choices. So the last concept I'm talking about is GDP. GDP is actually really simple. It's an abbreviation for gross domestic product. So I'm going to break it down word by word. Gross means total. Domestic means your own country. Product means things that you made or you consumed. So gross domestic product contains several aspects: consumption, government spending, investment, and also net exports. So you add the first three together, and you subtract the last one from the first three. So which means you add consumption, government spending, and investment together. And these are all gross domestic product, because as you can see on the chart on the right, personal consumption is basically the money you have spent on buying things. And this money all contributes to the gross domestic product, because you are spending money in your own country, and and you have spent it on products or services of your own country. So this contributes to it. And also government spending, which is definitely contributing, because these government spending are spent on their own country and helping their own people out. Also, business investment is another part for gross domestic product, because business are investing, they put money into another business and hopes that the other business will succeed. This also happens in our own country and is helping our own country's economy. And the last one, which is more a unique one, is called the net exports. You want to subtract this from the gross domestic product because you're exporting all of your goods and services to other countries, which are being consumed in other countries and does not contribute to your gross domestic product. Instead, it takes a certain portion of your country's labor force to produce these things and then selling it to other countries for foreigners to consume. So you need to subtract it from the gross domestic product. And so this is the basic breakdown of GDP. And in usual cases, a country's economic strength can be demonstrated through GDP. So if you have a very high GDP in the world, it means that your economical strength is pretty much very good. And higher GDP means better economy, basically. It is actually more complicated than that, but I don't want to go too deep today because I know most of you are new to economics. So these are some basic concepts of economics, and most of them are being brought up and developed by Adam Smith himself. So we should definitely respect this great person in economical history and do not forget him at all. So moving on, I think everyone's getting a bit bored. I'll tell you two stories, and it is two real-life stories that have happened in the history, which are related to economics. So the first one is the hemline index. In case some of you wonder, it is actually something to do with women's dresses and the stock market. So this theory is talking about when women's dresses get shorter, the economy of that country is also booming and the stock markets are going good. But then when the stock markets crash and the economy crashes, the dresses become longer. So the hemline is becoming lower. And this is actually true. And people have spent a lot of time and effort in researching this. And research have shown that these two aspects are actually correlated, which means they're related and are being affected by, and the dresses are being affected by the economy. So women designers also know economics. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So as you can see on the second chart, it provides a brief description for the hemline index, but it's not really too clear. It basically wrote what I said before, and also it says there is a 3-year time lag between the onset of economic woes and the lengthening of skirt hemlines. So which means when your stock markets just suddenly crash and the economy goes down, there are a few years before the hemlines go down too, and women begin to wear longer dress in general. So this one is about actually Christopher Columbus and the birth of stock markets. So you might wonder, what does a explorer with a bunch of ships has to do with the economy? Well, they actually had relations, because during the time when Columbus set on his legendary journey towards the New World, he was being financially aided. So there is no way for him to reach America, or actually the North American mainland, without having the financial aid from the Spanish king and queen at the time. So basically the royals provided him ships, men, resources, and also money to reach the destinations and to negotiate or trade with the locals. So he was being financially aided. In return, Columbus Columbus will claim royalty to the Spanish nobles and kings, and he would claim the land that he had discovered as Spanish territory. He would also find any valuable treasures, resources, and claim them as Spanish too. So this is basically like a gamble for the Spanish king or queen, because they didn't know whether Columbus was going to succeed. If he failed and just simply gone missing, then all the money they had spent on his fleet would become wasted. So they had undergone a great risk, but at the end, they have benefited a lot and made a huge profit from the new world that Christopher Columbus has discovered. So, but then not every king or queen could do that, or not every nobles had the will to do that, because many of them had no courage to take such a huge risk and put all their eggs in one basket, as the saying goes, which means putting all their money into one single team of explorers. So the people in Europe began to find a solution to this problem, because less and less royalties were financially supporting these campaigns over time. And the time that Christopher Columbus was at is called the Discovery Age, which means many European fleets were sailing on the vast oceans to discover unknown waters or lands, to find valuable resources or trade routes for their mastery countries. So people who don't want to risk that much came up with a plan or a solution. They are gathering more people around them to pay for the adventurers together. So now that the cost of this expenditure is being shared between different shareholders, so which means different people pay different money, and they collect and gather all the money together to give it to the explorer and his team to use. So every member only paid a portion of that total cost. And if the explorer failed and gone missing or died, then the loss for every individual shareholder is a lot smaller than before, because now people are sharing this loss, and they only lost a portion of the entire cost. But on the other hand, if the explorer succeeded and found something valuable, then this profit is being shared among all the shareholders. So everyone gets the treasures. So this is a solution with a lot less risks, and more people were willing to do this, to the point that it became a market itself. And then this is how the stock markets began to come to existence in the world. So this is a very interesting story. And next time you can say something else about Christopher Columbus rather than him discovering the new world. You can say that he substantially and in a way helped to form the stock markets, and therefore should also be remembered in the economic world. And as today's seminar is coming to an end, I would definitely recommend some useful resources to you guys if you want to dig deeper. And these are some documentaries and books for you to take a look at. So the one on the left is called The Ascent of Money. It's being filmed by an UK production, and I believe it's really interesting to watch, because it just talked about the money history that I have discussed with you earlier today. And also another documentary by CCTV, which is called RMB, is a documentary about the wealth of China and how it has formed its own modern currency. And the two books are below. I think there's no need to introduce them because you can see the titles and all the cover. So they're all books for basic economic learners, and they're pretty useful and fun to read it. So these are my recommendations, and I have explained the famous person's ideas and concepts, and also his famous invisible hand to you. And I recommended some useful resources for you to further study economics. And I'm planning to do a series on this topic. And I feel that I'll kind of change and swap it up in terms of ways I teach economics. In future classes, I'm planning to find some real life examples and in daily life, which are more related to us. And then I would analyze and explain the hidden economical aspect behind it. So what are some economical reasons that pushed the daily phenomena that we see? So I guess that will be more interesting to learn. And now is question time. So I will look at the questions that you guys have. So Angelina asked about whether I should, I think she's talking about the shoe selling thing. The price of shoes are not changing. What is changing is the marginal cost. So the marginal cost is divided into different pieces if you sell multiple pairs of shoes, because as I said before, no matter how many shoes you sold in the store, you only had to pay for the rent of the store, which was $50. So if you sold 5 pairs of shoes, for each pair of shoes, you only need to pay $10 the cost. So as 1/5 of the rent you paid, which is $10. So you make $40 profit for each pair of shoes. And in total, you made a profit of $200. And that works the same for the second, the third, and the next day. And I didn't say the shoe seller have to change careers. I only said that he should maybe close his business and sell something else. Or maybe he can ask someone to fix the problem on his shoe, so that people will begin to slowly return to his store and continue to buy his shoes now that the problem is solved. So find someone to fix the problems on the laces. And the price is not changing. The other example, we have prices change. I think it's the pizza one. It's been determined by both the supply and demand curve. Okay, that's great. Another person asked, why do rulers put their faces on coins? Oh, this is actually a very interesting question. Let me go back. So rulers pull faces on their coins. Basically, the same reason why nowadays we can see our president's faces on our currency. So you can see Truman or maybe, I don't know, Franklin Roosevelt's face on American dollars, and also Chairman Mao's face on RMB. They all work the same. It's that the rulers putting their face on money to show their authority, to show that when all the people trade using money in their country, they're watching the faces of the rulers, and the rulers are reminding them that I'm giving you the prosperity you have right now. So by printing their heads on the currency, they show a state of authority and control over their own countries, and to say that I am the most powerful human being in our country, and I have the right and power to print myself on currencies. Because currency is the most common thing in the country, aside from national flags or national languages, because everyone uses that currency in the country. And by printing his image on on the currencies, he makes sure that everyone knows him in the country and everyone respects him. And that's one of the major reasons why they put hats on the coins. They can also show their pretty faces to other countries, because when foreigners come and uses their currencies, they're learning about their country's leader. So there's no more questions? Okay, good. Those were really nice questions, and I loved them. And thank you guys for exploring with me and with Icebreaker. I really appreciate that so many people have come today, and you have all listened patiently throughout my seminar. Thank you very much. And now I'll hand it to Wendy.
Okay, thank you all for coming here. I really hope everyone learned something. I personally learned a lot. For example, like the importance of Adam Smith and his works. I Explore will continue to host more seminars in the future, so be sure to check them out. So once again, I am thanking all of you for coming. Thank you very much.
And here is our logo with our QR code. And if any of you who's not in iExplore, if you're interested to join, please feel free to scan the code and join our social media groups.